A routine house search seemed ordinary, until the police dog froze in front of a locked closet. He refused to move, barking non-stop, and when officers finally forced it open, what they uncovered left the entire room in silence. But the question remains, what could be hidden so carefully that even trained officers were speechless? Here's the full story. But before we continue, tell me your favorite moment with a dog in the comments, and if you love dogs, make sure you've hit subscribe. The call came in on a gray afternoon when the streets were quiet and the air hung heavy with the weight of late summer heat. It was a standard search warrant, the kind officers had done many times before. The house in question was modest, tucked at the end of a narrow street, its windows drawn and its garden unkempt. Nothing about it seemed unusual at first glance, yet the circumstances leading them there suggested otherwise. The officers entered carefully, their footsteps echoing against the wooden floors. Every corner of the home was checked. A small kitchen, dusty living room, and a hallway lined with old picture frames told the story of a house that had seen better days. Still, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. But with them was the most trusted member of the team, a trained police dog named Ranger. He moved with focus, his nose brushing across the floor and furniture, guiding his handler with silent determination. At first, Ranger seemed uninterested, sniffing around without urgency. Then, as the team reached the back of the house, something shifted. His posture stiffened, tail raised, ears pinned forward. He began to pull toward a side door that led into a spare bedroom. The officers followed, exchanging tense looks as they entered. The room was plain, nearly empty except for a chair, an old dresser, and a tall closet tucked against the far wall. The closet was secured with a padlock, which in itself was unusual in such an ordinary home. Ranger froze in front of the locked closet, nose pressed hard against the wood. His body trembled with alertness, and then came the sound that broke the silence, a sharp, insistent bark. A once, then again, echoing off the walls. He pawed at the door with urgency, his claws scratching against the old paint. The officers stopped in their tracks. The padlocked closet seemed ordinary at first glance. Yet why would a dog so well-trained and experienced react so strongly to it? Questions surged through their minds. Was it drugs, weapons, or something else entirely? The dog never barked without reason. The officers examined the closet closer. Dust lined the top shelf, yet the padlock appeared newer, out of place compared to the worn-out wood. Ranger continued, barking, growling low, refusing to move even as his handler tugged gently at the leash. He was locked in, eyes fixed on that door as if nothing else in the world mattered. This reaction sparked memories of earlier reports that had brought them to this house. Neighbors had spoken of odd noises late at night, sometimes muffled cries or movements that seemed unusual for such a quiet home. Some said the man who lived there had been secretive, rarely seen outside, and when he did appear, he avoided eye contact. Others claimed the lights in the spare bedroom often stayed on well past midnight. Suddenly, the dots began to connect. The neighbors' reports, the locked closet, the dog refusing to move. Something about all of it hinted at a hidden story waiting to unfold. The officers secured the scene and prepared to cut the padlock. Every second felt heavy. Ranger stood his ground, nose pressed to the gap beneath the door, his body trembling. He barked again, sharper this time, as if urging them not to waste time. When the lock finally gave way, the door creaked open slightly, but Ranger lunged forward before anyone else could react. He pushed his nose and paws into the narrow opening, desperate to reach what was inside. The officers pulled him back and swung the door wide open. The inside of the closet was dark, the smell of damp wood and old fabric filling the air. Boxes lined the shelves, and clothes hung loosely from hangers, but behind those items was something concealed. The wall of the closet seemed deeper than it should have been, a section that did not match the layout of the house. Ranger clawed at the floor, pawing at a spot near the back corner. The officers removed the boxes and clothes, revealing a faint seam in the wood, almost as if a false panel had been installed. It was not obvious, yet the dog had found it with instinct alone. With careful hands, the officers pried it open. What lay beyond was enough to silence everyone in the room. A narrow space extended behind the closet, a hidden compartment no larger than a crawl space. Inside were scattered belongings, a blanket, a few old food containers, and something else that made the air grow heavier. A small, torn notebook lay on the floor, its pages filled with handwriting. Ranger sniffed at it, but then turned his focus back toward the corner, barking again, more insistent than before. The officers shone a light deeper inside. The blanket was folded as if someone had been using it recently. The food containers were not old enough to be abandoned. Whoever had stayed there might have left only hours before. The realization struck all at once. Someone had been hiding here. Questions grew louder in the officers' minds. Who had been living inside that narrow space? Why hide behind a locked closet in an ordinary suburban home? What were they running from? And why was Ranger so restless, as if something still remained undiscovered? Every detail began to weave a pattern, but the full picture was not yet clear. The notebook contained pages of writing, but the words were hurried, almost frantic, and many were difficult to read. Still, scattered among them were repeated phrases, cries for help, mentions of being trapped, mentions of a name that none of the officers recognized. The dog would not settle. His tail wagged furiously as he pressed against the far end of the hidden space, barking, scratching, demanding attention. It was as though he knew the true secret had not yet been uncovered. The team realized this was no ordinary search. What had begun as a routine warrant had shifted into something far more serious. Behind that closet door lay not only hidden belongings, but perhaps a hidden life, a secret waiting to be exposed. The officers backed out slowly, the air tense, their thoughts racing. The closet was no longer just a piece of furniture. It was a gateway to a mystery that Ranger had forced open, one that was now unfolding piece by piece. And with each bark echoing through the small room, the weight of what still lay hidden pressed harder against them. The silence in the room grew heavier as the officers studied the hidden space. Ranger still barked, his claws scrapping against the wood as though the truth lay just inches beyond their reach. The officers knew this was more than a hidden storage spot. Every detail, the padlock, the blanket, the fresh food containers, hinted that someone had been here not long ago. The notebook drew their attention again. Its pages were frantic but revealing. Among scattered words were pleas for freedom, descriptions of nights spent in fear, and mentions of a locked door. The name written repeatedly throughout was Anna. The writing style suggested desperation, each page a cry that someone had been silenced too long. Why was this closet sealed? Why had someone gone to such lengths to hide a person, or at least their belongings? Ranger pressed harder into the space, tail stiff, ears alert. The officers followed his lead, checking the back wall of the crawl space. When their flashlights ran across the boards, one corner reflected differently, as if tampered with. They tapped against it, and the hollow sound confirmed it. Another layer was hidden behind the first. Carefully, they pried it open. The boards shifted, revealing a second chamber, narrower and darker. A rush of stale air filled the room, carrying the scent of confinement. Inside was a mattress on the floor, blankets rumpled, and water bottles lined against the wall. The setup was recent, not abandoned. Ranger let out a sharp bark and pushed forward, nose to the ground, tracing the scent of someone who had spent long hours there. His tail wagged with intensity, not fear, as though he knew something vital remained undiscovered. The team's hearts raced. If someone had lived here, where were they now? The neighbors' stories about cries in the night suddenly made sense. It was not imagination. Someone had been trapped here, right under their noses. The discovery connected to a missing persons report from weeks earlier. A young woman had vanished from a nearby town, her disappearance unexplained. The photo from that case showed a bright-eyed woman with auburn hair. Her name was Anna. The same name scrawled throughout the notebook. The pieces aligned painfully well. This was not just a hiding space. This was captivity. But the room was empty now. The bedding showed signs of recent use, food still fresh, bottles still half full. Whoever had been here must have been removed or relocated very recently. The urgency in Ranger's behavior suggested the trail was not cold. He barked toward the hallway, then pulled at the leash, guiding the officers out of the bedroom and deeper into the house. They followed without hesitation. Ranger led them down a narrow stairway into the basement. The concrete floor was bare except for a workbench and shelves of tools. But he stopped abruptly in front of a large cabinet bolted against the wall. Again he barked furiously, scratching at the edges as though lives depended on it. When the officers pulled the cabinet aside, a hidden door revealed itself, small and reinforced. Behind it was another chamber, cramped and windowless. And there, sitting against the wall, shielding her face from the sudden burst of light, was Anna. She was weak but alive. The dog's cries had guided them to her at the very moment. Hope was slipping away. The officers carefully brought her out, assuring her safety while Ranger wagged his tail and nuzzled against her as if he had known her all along. The truth was now undeniable. The man who had lived in the house had kept her hidden, locked away from the world, concealed behind false walls and secret doors. The locked closet had been the first clue, the doorway to unraveling a terrible secret. Without Ranger's persistence, she might have remained trapped indefinitely. Anna was taken into care, her family notified. The reunion was overwhelming, filled with relief and tears. She had endured weeks of fear, yet she had survived. And it was the dog who refused to ignore what others might have overlooked that had given her back her freedom. As the investigation unfolded, officers pieced together the full story. The suspect had constructed the hidden compartments deliberately, planning them as a prison. He had believed no one would discover them, that the house appeared too ordinary to draw suspicion. But Ranger had shattered that illusion in minutes, following instincts sharpened by training and loyalty. The community was stunned. The neighbors who had reported strange noises felt vindicated yet horrified by how close the truth had been. The locked closet, which once seemed like just an odd detail in a neglected home, became the symbol of hidden cruelty and the symbol of how persistence and instinct could bring light to the darkest corners. In the days that followed, Ranger was celebrated, though he seemed unaware of his heroism. For him it had been instinct, a refusal to ignore a scent, a refusal to move from a door that concealed something vital. For the officers, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest signals, a bark, a scratch, a refusal to give up, can change everything. Anna began her recovery surrounded by family. She carried scars of her ordeal, but she was free, she was alive, and her story became one of resilience, the kind that inspires entire communities. The case closed not with despair, but with relief, gratitude, and renewed faith in the bond between humans and the animals who serve beside them. The locked closet had once been a place of silence and fear, but thanks to a determined police dog, it became the doorway to freedom, and in that transformation lay the happy ending no one thought possible. If you like these kind of stories, make sure you have subscribed to our channel, because we upload every day. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss any update, and in the comments tell us where in the world are you watching this video. See you in the next one.